You're listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us for another segment. In this segment, we're going to have a conversation with David Elsley. He's joining us here as president and CEO of Cardiol Therapeutics, Incorporated. It's a clinical stage biotech company. He's joining us to talk about the company's research and clinical development of innovative anti-inflammatory therapies for the treatment of cardiovascular disease. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, David Elsley. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil, and it's great to be with you this afternoon.
Well, President, CEO of Cardiol Therapeutics Incorporated, have you always been involved in the biotech space?
I've been working in the biotechnology space now for, 3 decades now, always focused on heart failure medicine, as has the majority of the team at Cardiol Therapeutics. We've dedicated really substantially our careers to developing new ways to address the epidemic of heart failure, which is a condition that continues to affect 26 million people in the developed world and remains a leading cause of death and disability.
Cardiovascular disease, or CVD, is a wide-ranging diagnosis, is it not?
It most certainly is. It covers a broad range of conditions affecting the heart and the vascular system. Our particular area of interest is inflammation in the heart and the heart muscle and the vascular system, which really underlie heart failure, which is, as it suggests, a failure of the heart to function properly as a pump and provide oxygenation to the body. And this leads to extraordinary complications, marked impact on quality of life, and takes the lives of hundreds of thousands of people a year around the world.
Now, your lead product, CardiolRx, I understand it's a pharmaceutically produced oral cannabidiol formulation. Is that correct?
Yes, there was an interesting discovery made that was at the National Institute of Health in 2010 that basically demonstrated the ability of this interesting molecule, cannabidiol, which is probably more broadly known by your audience now as CBD, to reverse deadly inflammatory and fibrotic processes that can happen in a model of diabetic-induced heart failure, basically. And this fascinated us as developers in this area, and we decided to develop what we believe to be the most state-of-the-art pharmaceutical program to make this interesting drug or this interesting molecule available eventually for patients suffering from heart disease.
CardiolRx, I understand, has entered a phase 2 and 3 outcomes study in certain patients. Talk a bit about this study and talk about how it relates to the current pandemic that we're experiencing now.
Certainly. So one of the most vulnerable patient populations to the COVID virus are patients either with established cardiovascular disease or risk factors for cardiovascular disease, such as diabetes or high blood pressure or obesity. So we see this as a unique opportunity to study and basically explore and demonstrate the cardioprotective properties of the medicine that we're developing in the context of the pandemic, because what happens when the virus invades the cardiopulmonary system, or the heart, it can activate the immune system against the virus, and that can lead to a massive inflammatory response that can cause multi-organ failure and death in these patients. And we believe CardiolRx, the formula we've developed, holds great promise to protect these high-risk patients during the vulnerable phase of the immune attack on the virus. And so we propose to the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, one of the largest clinical trials ever to be conducted with this form of medicine. We are now enrolling up to 422 patients in the U.S. into this study. And we're very hopeful that this trial will lead to a new therapeutic to protect a very high-risk population from complications such as heart attack and stroke and mortality from this disease.
Will all of the participants in this study be patients that are currently hospitalized or being hospitalized as testing positive for COVID-19, or are there other candidates as well?
The candidates that will be eligible for enrollment in this trial need to have been hospitalized. They need to be COVID positive, and they need to have either established cardiovascular disease or risk factors for cardiovascular disease like obesity or high blood pressure or diabetes.
Is this trial focused on COVID-19 specifically, no matter what the variant, or are there different aspects based on the variant that the patient might be hospitalized with?
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify that in this study, the study is designed to basically investigate the ability of our drug to protect the cardiovascular system against the inflammation that is caused by the immune system's response to the COVID infection. We're not targeting the virus per se or any variant of the virus. We're basically we've designed a program to protect the cardiovascular system while the immune system does its job of attacking the virus, because it is really the immune response and the inflammation caused by the immune response that leads to very significant cardiovascular complications and death in a significant number of patients.
What about inflammation as it relates to cardiovascular disease in vaccinated teenagers who still got COVID-19? How is CardiolRx going to affect them, and is that going to be addressed, of course, in these trials?
We are planning a program in acute myocarditis, which is a form of inflammation in the heart muscle, which manifests itself in young teenagers and young adults, primarily people under the age of 30, predominantly male, young, healthy adults. This is the leading cause of sudden cardiac death in that population, so it remains a devastating form of heart inflammation. And in certain rare circumstances, certain of the vaccine strategies that are being deployed against COVID have resulted in acute myocarditis developing, predominantly in young, healthy males. So historically speaking, myocarditis has primarily been caused by a viral infection. You can think of the flu virus or the influenza virus as a primary cause. Now we're getting myocarditis-like phenomena being caused by the COVID virus, and as a rare complication of certain of the vaccine strategies and certain cancer treatments, that can also lead to this deadly form of heart inflammation.
Now, was Cardiol Therapeutics on the path to developing these anti-inflammatory compounds prior to the pandemic, or is this new test for CardiolRx a result of the pandemic and its effect on your organization and research?
We've always been focused prior to the pandemic on developing anti-inflammatory therapies for heart failure and acute myocarditis. What the pandemic presented basically to the company was a unique opportunity to rapidly explore the cardioprotective properties in cardiovascular population who were at increased risk for cardiovascular inflammation as a result of becoming infected with a COVID virus. So, if anything, the pandemic presented yet another opportunity for us to study cardiovascular inflammation on top of the programs that we were already underway with.
Well, David, give our listeners a website where we can learn a lot more about your company and about the technology that you're researching there, and more about the phase 2 and 3 trials that you're currently involved in.
Certainly. I would welcome all of your listeners to visit us at CardiolRx.com. That's CardiolRx.com. And there's a large array of information about the company and its programs on that site.
Great. Well, David, I appreciate you joining us here on the program this evening. Hopefully we'll speak again.
Okay, thank you for having me. It's been a great pleasure speaking with you this evening.
You as well. You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.